Today's episode is with Jasmine Ivy, who is an intuitive business coach. Before she was an intuitive business coach, she was in Silicon Valley as a marketing executive. She had an insane life experience that we will talk about later, very soon. And that kind of got her wheels thinking and questioning where she was in her life and where she actually wanted to be. And from that, she started this company, Women of Woo. And she is the founder. She helps women all around learn to really tune into their own intuition in the businesses that they're doing, and has some pretty great success stories, I would say, with your clients and with yourself. You also have 2 kids and your husband. You live in Kentucky, and she is just like a ball of sunshine. Actually, I love we had some conversation before we started, but I'm excited to have this conversation with you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. We're going to have a good conversation today.
We are going to have a good conversation today. And what else would you like the listeners to know about you that I may have missed?
I think that just relax as you listen to that. Some of this will be very shocking. Like she said, my story is pretty surprising for a lot of people. Let yourself hear it and let yourself get the value from it, because I lived the story. What the story we're going to tell is like a few years ago, right? So let it wash over you, but then be available to what you can learn from it, because that's truly the legacy of it. And all that's to say, spoiler alert, I'm here and I live.
Yes, so, amazing.
As you hear this story, keep your ears open as you come through it and really be available, because there is a lot to learn from what happened to me and what we're going to talk about. So, yeah.
No, that's absolutely so true. And I think sometimes when we hear things that we don't want to be a part of, or that make it maybe bring out like some of our biggest fears, or we tend to stop listening because we're afraid. And I think it's really important to not lean into the fear and to run away, but also say, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I be more prepared from hearing these stories or this experience? And also learning, obviously now you really truly teach people and encourage people to listen to themselves. And in that moment, yourself was shouting at you, right? It's something that you maybe weren't hearing before. So let's go back to 2016. You are currently living in another state, but you're traveling to California because you work 1 week in California, 3 weeks at home. You get to work in California. You're at the airport, and a kind of a newer service was it like an Uber or a Lyft driver? I'm not sure which company. Rideshare, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. And so your driver comes and picks you up, and you're going to work. And tell me what happens.
Yeah. So I was arriving at the San Francisco airport, and I was just telling you, Chelsea, that I took a picture of my stuff. I had my little Starbucks and my travel case, and I was feeling really proud of myself. And the driver pulls up and the car matches and I get in. And so we're headed into the city. I'm going directly to work. And basically, as soon as there's that on-ramp that comes onto a freeway out of an airport, right? And as soon as we get on there, I get a phone call from someone who says, "Hey, Jasmine, I'm your driver. Where are you?" And I kind of giggle in a confused way and say, "What do you mean you're my driver? I'm with my driver." And he says in a very, serious voice, he says, "No, Jasmine, I'm your driver." And in that moment, I understood that I was being kidnapped. And so at that moment, also the driver of the car, he put his arm over and said, "Give me your phone." And so it got real, real fast. And so thankfully, the actual driver on the phone, he had some quick thinking, because I did not. He had quick thinking and said, "Call out the things that you're seeing." So as we're hurtling up the freeway, up the I-5 freeway in Northern California, if you know anything about that, this is not like a 1 or 2 lane road. There's cars everywhere, and we're going very fast. And as we're hurtling up this freeway, there's a whole lot going on. And I'm shouting out these mile markers as we pass them, because that's what the driver on the phone, the real driver,
who was familiar with the area.
Yes. So he's telling me to just say everything I see so that he can kind of place us. But more even than that, he's doing it because he wants the driver of the car to realize someone is tracking us. And it's brilliant. Like I didn't even understand it at the time. I just did what I needed to do, but later I really realized how smart that was.
Yeah.
Not only could he find us, but he was letting the driver know a real message. And so as this is all happening, right, you're shouting out all these things, you've got a lot of fear and you've got to stay calm, which is practically impossible. And you're thinking about, I had an infant son at the time, and I'm thinking about my baby who will never know me, like will literally never know his mother. And I was thinking about my husband, and I was thinking about my mother, and I was thinking about like, they'll never know what happened to me. Like they may never find me. Like I was having those kind of thoughts. And in the middle of all that, right?
Because you're like, there's a reason why he showed up and took me.
Right. Yeah. Clearly. Right. There's obviously a reason, because he's not making it better. Right. If this was all a mistake, right, he could have said a lot of things to like change what's happening. Right. If you're the good guy driving this car and you hear all that's happening, you aren't just like, oh, well, and you're right. So
and you're not asking someone to give you, right. He wasn't like, hey, where should I bring her? Right.
Right. Or, hey, calm down. Or, hey, I'll stop and let, like, that's what you would say if you were like the good guy.
Like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I have the wrong person. I didn't mean to. Like, I was just trying to do my job. Like, this is terrible. I'm going to be in trouble for this. Let's get you to where you need to be. Right.
Exactly. None of that is happening, right? So instead, he's just yelling at me to give him my phone, and I'm obviously not giving him my phone.
You did mention that your instinct was to give him the phone, because when you're afraid, you go into survival mode, and so you just want to follow instructions in order to survive. But the driver said, do not give him your phone.
Yes. So in the very beginning, when he, put his arm over, because that picture sticks with me, because he put his arm over and said, give me your phone, in a really authoritative voice. I was just saying. And when you hear that in a moment of high fear, your instinct is just to do what someone says. And thank goodness I had basically the bug in my ear who was like, do not, Jasmine, do not give him your phone. And so, that's something to really take away from this as you're listening to this. Again, don't let your fear cloud you, but that is something to just kind of file away, is that in a scary situation, the quote unquote bad guys, they know that talking to you in an authoritative way will make you want to do it, because you just want somebody to tell you what to do, because your brain has scrambled.
Because you're like, what is happening? What has happened? How can I get myself out of this situation? Right. So learning to hear your own voice in those situations is especially important, because not everyone has the luxury of someone on the other end of the phone.
Absolutely. And in my case, it wasn't even that at that time when he told me to give him my phone, it wasn't even like I had a bunch of things in my head. It was like I had nothing. It was like somebody pressed like blank and there was just nothing, right? Because shock happens before fear. I wasn't scared yet at that point. I was like in disbelief, which is another important thing we didn't even talk about. So disbelief happens first. Your brain literally, because like, you don't think you're going to be kidnapped on a Monday morning at 8:00. You know what I mean? Like your brain is like, this is not happening. You're being ridiculous, right? Your brain actively tries to convince you it's not happening, which is not helpful at all, but that's what was happening. So that's something to know too, is disbelief is
interesting.
Normal. Yeah. So in the middle of all this, if we fast forward back to, I'm calling out all the mile markers and just the chaos of all that, right? This guy's telling me to give him my phone. This guy's doing his thing, keeping me safe, actually. In the middle of all that, I have a thought that completely changes everything. And it is this: I'm going to die because of this stupid job. Now, remember 10 minutes ago or so, I don't even know how long it was, I was taking a picture of my travel case and my Starbucks, feeling like I was pretty darn fancy. And I even sent that to my friend. So I was feeling super fancy. And now it's a stupid job. In my brain, I had this thought, what did you just say? Right? As if my brain didn't have enough to do. It literally it was like the record stopped, and instantly I was like, wait, this is a stupid job. And it's just one of those moments where it was enough of an abrupt thought that paused everything for enough of a second for me to have this moment of like, oh, this is what's real. I don't really want to be here. I don't want to do this. I don't want to climb this ladder. I don't want to be an executive. I don't want to have crazy people that I
Yeah.
work with and toxic work environments. And it helped me in that moment realize, wait a minute, I haven't done what I came here to do.
It's
Right.
like
We all
your reality glasses were put on you
right.
all of a sudden you like saw everything. You step back, you step
Right.
out of like
Mm-hmm.
the cool parts of it, and you step back and you're like, oh wait, hold on, what is all of this? It's like the life
Right.
evaluation.
Right. It was an instant, it was like a light switch, is sometimes how
Hmm.
I describe it.
Yeah.
And most of us don't have the benefit of a light switch, right? Instead, all of your life, there's this quiet whisper,
Hmm.
and you just are like, yeah, but I got to do this. Yeah, but I got to do this. And it was like, I suddenly couldn't do that. And it was just like, bam, it was the truth in black and white, cannot
Hmm.
disregard it. And it was at that moment that I really switched into kind of frantic panic, because
Yeah.
that's kind of where I was. I switched from that into, oh no, this is not happening. It was like the mama bear part of me came out too. And suddenly I was
Yeah.
just like, you're not going to take me from my child. You're not going to take me from my purpose that I have absolutely not even got to taste. You're not
Mm.
going to take me from this. Not me, not today, not now. And so I became much more aggressive. I just yelled at him, you pull over, you do this, you do that, you do this. And so now I became not just, I was a liability with the real
Hmm.
driver knowing, but now I'm really a liability because I'm
Yeah.
not going to go easy. And so I think honestly, I just became more trouble than it was worth.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's the best way to describe it. Eventually, by this point, we are off of the freeway and we're in this back area of the airport. Remember, we're coming from the airport, which is quite large in San Francisco. And so we're in what I would describe as an abandoned, I mean, there's nothing there. There's just empty buildings, but we're pretty deep into it. And he eventually leaves me at like what I would describe as an abandoned, maybe bus stop or the shuttles or something.
Yeah.
And he leaves me there and I'm able to talk my real driver there, who had, of course, been kind of following me mentally this whole time. And he finally is able to find me. But I was just a totally different person. The person standing there from the person 10 or 15 minutes earlier at the arrivals, um, it was just totally different person. And I went to work. I was just saying, I like the good marketing executive I was.
She's also an
I went to
Enneagram
work.
3 for anyone who knows what
Yes.
that is
Yes.
no one's surprised. If they know about that, they're like, okay, you got kidnapped, you almost died, and then you went to work.
Right.
So no one's surprised
Right.
by that, right?
And I was not late.
And she was not
Yeah. So I
late.
went
Of
to work.
course not. Oh my.
That's right. Yes. Went to work but that was my last week. I put in my notice and I never came back.
Mm.
Yeah. So I mean, it changed everything and it changed it right away. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, now to calm some of your nerves, like I do think we were talking about this before we started recording, because this conversation is about, the ride, but it's also very much not about the ride. So when you're getting in a ride share, make sure you are looking at the license plate and checking the name, making sure you have your location shared on, right? Like all the things that can prevent you from being in a similar situation, right? But also like the conversation, what this really is about is like, what are you being kidnapped from in your life, right? Like in that moment, physically, you were being taken from your life, and all of a sudden, you had this awakening of like what actually was important to you. And you mentioned that you had this little whisper going on inside of you, right? That was telling you that you had more in you, that you had this purpose, that you wanted not to just be in this hustle, this grind in this work, but you had your own work that you really wanted to do. And like in the moment, you were physically kidnapped, right? But also but the way that I see it is like, also, how long were you a hostage to your own self before that, right? Or even now, that for anyone listening, it's like you might not physically be kidnapped, being taken from your purpose or from the call that's on your heart, or that's inside of you, but you might be actually the one holding yourself hostage over here in this abandoned warehouse, or in this car that's going on this path that you're like, no, I don't want to go, but you're too afraid to like speak up. You're too afraid to say, get me off of here. You're too afraid to say, no, actually there's something over here that has been calling for me, that's been speaking to me, that feels so important, right? And you had that light, that light switch moment that you spoke about, that felt like this gift, that you were like, oh, this is big, this is serious, and like, I'm not going to mess with this anymore. I'm actually going to make the changes. But the majority of us have to literally listen to the voice, right? To get out of those situations. We have to listen to the voice and say, here is where I'm being called. Here is what feels like the right path for me. Here is what feels right and true and good. So how do you, and I'm assuming this is, kind of like what you help people do in the work that you do, but like, what do you say to someone who's having those feelings, having that call, but still maybe in that hostage situation?
I actually think that all of us, like someone listening right now, you already know what it is that you would regret having not done. You already know.
Yeah.
Like you already know. Just putting yourself into the back of that car right now. Just do it right now. Like pause us even and just like sit there for a second. You know exactly what it is that you will wish you had done. Right. Like we don't have to like wait for that. We already know. All of us know. I knew. Right. I wasn't surprised by that. And so that has come up for you probably hundreds of times, literally hundreds of times probably in your life, of like what you wish you were doing, what you would hope to do. Right. And you push it off for some day that you think the circumstances will be better or more, whatever. Right. You move the benchmark no matter what you achieve in order to do that later.
And you're triggered by other people who are doing the thing that you actually want to be doing.
Sure. Yeah. But also you're put in your place by everyone else who isn't doing their thing. And like in my case, it was this very, kind of like literal life or death moment. But the truth is, I do think that there will come a time where you will have a moment that will be really big and you don't have to wait for it. Right. Yeah. In my case, that it was just like, I probably had a lot of chances to not be in the back of that car.
Right.
Right. But I didn't take them. And so I do think that everybody has these moments that are big. For example, it could be a divorce, or it could be like, big things that happen in life. Like everyone, none of us are immune to those big things. It might not be kidnapping, but we all have it. Right. And so we get these huge turning point opportunities. They are opportunities. And like, at any point you can decide, right? At any moment you can decide. I had this massive moment in that experience, but your moment could literally be right now listening to this.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you think about it, any change I had made would have made it so that I was never even there. If I had listened to it 6 months before, I would not have been there.
Right? Absolutely true.
So I kept myself on the trajectory to be in the back of that car that day. Like that was, not to say that takes responsibility off the guy. That's not what I'm saying. But like, there is an element of like, it's very clear. I should not have been there. I just shouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I knew that.
So you go home and you put in your 2 weeks, and what does that look like from there?
Yeah. So I did what most marketing people do, which is I moved into consulting, and I did that as I formulated the idea of coaching. I had been in marketing at that point. I had been in it for 16 years. And so I just moved into consulting, and I got a lot of job offers because, I was coming out of Silicon Valley, and they're kind of known as the best in the business. And so I got a lot of job offers, and I basically had to make a decision between whether I was going to finally pursue this thing that I kind of had always just kind of went into, and then I would let it go because something better would come along. And so I had to make a decision between, okay, am I going to just take another job, or am I going to really do this? Right. And that was another decision, which again, I had to choose it. And that was the time where I was like, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to just take a comfortable situation. I'm going to do this. And so it was probably not even 6 months before I turned down the really great offer I was getting. And I was like, you know what? No, I'm not doing this. I'm going to see this all the way through. And so that was at that point it was February when I turned down that offer. And I just went all the way in. And I only had, for the record, those of you listening, remember, I have a baby, right? Remember,
Yeah.
that's the time point. And so I put him in a 2-hour daycare, and I built the entire business in 2 hours a day, because I needed to be able to do calls. And I did, 242 free discovery calls that year. Wow. And they were 2 hours. So like, if you think about how many hours that actually is,
2-hour discovery
142 free discovery calls that year. And they were 2 hours long. Wow. Right. So that's 284 hours that I did. And I just really went all the way in, because I knew I was good at business. It was just a matter of like, am I able to do this as a coaching business? And so, that was my first six-figure year. It's the only just six-figure year. Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. What does Women of Woo mean to you now?
Oh, it's my legacy. I mean, it really, really is. Women of Woo, it was birthed also that year that I'm talking about. So this is 2017, later that year. And Women of Woo was really, those of you who know Strengths Finder, are you familiar with the Strengths Finder? Okay.
I mean, I actually have the whole thing printed out right here on my bench, but I haven't gone through all of it, but I do have it all printed out.
Yeah. So Woo is one of the results you can get on the Strengths Finder, which means winning others over, which is a very marketing, right? I have a marketing background. And basically that's what marketing is, winning others over into. So that really, I loved that. But also the intuition piece was important, because over the years of doing business, right, I had really realized that women in particular did business differently, that there was something, they had strengths that were not often, they were virtually never leveraged in corporate settings, and that they had an ability to connect with a customer or a client in a totally different way. And this is actually why people hired me. And they would say things, okay, these are men in suits, right? We're sitting men in suits around these tables, right? And they would say things like, let's ask Jasmine her opinion on this or that, because she's really intuitive about these things. They would literally say that.
Wow, that's really cool.
But they didn't know what they were saying. And so, you could only go so far. And so I really believed that if I taught women the way I thought about business and the way I approached it, that they would find success. And so when I was consulting, I was basically doing that almost for free to see, okay, does this work? Like, can we do this? Right. And so my clients were having wild successes. And so when we started to build up, and I, at that time, was doing one-on-one coaching, that's kind of what everybody did back then. And I realized I wanted to do this more in a group setting and let it be, bigger. And so that's kind of where Women of Woo was born. Women of Woo was not originally the name of the company. It was the name of that initial program. And it became so incredibly successful, and people, they didn't know my name. They knew Women of Woo. Yeah. And so people would be like, oh, you're Women of Woo, right? Yes. And so it evolved into becoming the company. But actually the program came first. And it birthed itself, basically.
That's so beautiful. And when you see the women that you're coaching step into this place where they're trusting themselves, that they're listening, and that they're growing their businesses in ways that feel authentic and good to them, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. I mean, it's the best thing I ever do. I mean, there's like my family and this, it's incredible. There's so many women who I've had women, most of our clients were new. So we have the Women of Woo Mastermind, that is where Women of Woo, the name, came from. It opens every quarter, but people renew over and over again. So we have people in there who've been in there 8 and 9 times. Almost more than half of every round renews. Reason I'm saying that is because these people come in having a brand new business or having made nothing, and then they make 100,000 and then 200,000, and they're doing things that are beautiful. Yeah. These are women that you would love to sit down with, who would inspire you just to have a conversation with. And now they're becoming women of means. And now they're able to have influence in their lives, right? So many women who are in terrible situations in their lives, and we've all known a woman who couldn't leave because she couldn't afford it. We've
Mm.
all known a woman who couldn't leave because she didn't believe in herself.
Yeah.
We've known women who stayed in horrible situations because they simply didn't have the means or the resources or even the understanding that they're allowed to be whole people. And
Mhm.
so to see women, and that's certainly not all of my people, but to understand what it means to generations of also young women who will
Yep.
see these women just grow into themselves and actually be able to do something that they love instead of doing what we're supposed to do. That's what led me to the back of that car, is doing what I was supposed to do. Right.
Mm.
And these women are younger and younger, right? Like I'm 40 years old, almost 41, but these women, right, are coming in and they're young and they have all these years and they're going to change everything. Like they're
Yeah.
going to change everything for our daughters.
Yep.
And like the world is going to be different because our daughters are growing up in a world that like you get to do what you're here to do. You
Yep.
don't have to do what I did.
No,
Right?
it's
Like you don't have to do that.
absolutely. I always like that's like one of the greatest gifts of the work that I get to do is that I feel like the example to my children of like find your voice, find your passion, find
Mhm.
what is calling for you and don't just show up and do, and find
Right.
purpose in the work that you do. Even
Yeah.
if when you're 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20,
Mhm.
whatever, even if you have a job, what gifts what of your gifts
Mhm.
can you bring to the table and how can you
Right.
bring more fulfillment in everything that you do,
Mhm.
which I just love. So I share a very similar mission and hope and
Mhm.
work for the women that I talk to and the women that I work with and
Mhm.
coach. And it's such a beautiful thing. And I just love the idea of really listening to that voice and taking
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
taking back what belongs to you and making sure that you're leaning into that call and not and avoiding being a hostage to yourself or in your situation, someone else who is going to take you down a path that
Mhm.
they wanted, that you never
Yeah.
wanted, right? That you never
Yeah.
ever wanted.
Mhm.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for coming on and
Mhm.
sharing this
Yeah.
experience. I think that
Yeah.
the just even the representation of that story can speak so loudly to us in our own life. So I
Mhm.
appreciate
Yeah.
the work that you're doing and the message that you're
Yeah.
sharing with this.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I have to end the podcast with these two questions that are super important to me. This
Mhm.
idea of fire in her heart and peace in her soul, is something that is really important for me, and I really want the listeners to adapt this into their life, because I think that we should always have those things that are lighting us on fire, that we are passionate about, that feel
Mhm.
fulfilling and good, but not at the expense of our peace, right? We don't have to
Yeah.
sacrifice ourselves for that peace, but we can have both
Mhm.
of those things in a
Yeah.
beautiful harmony with each other. So what is
Mhm.
something that is currently lighting your heart on fire?
What's currently lighting my heart on fire, I think, is the fact that at this point in my business, I've found ways to create boundaries and I've gifted
Mm,
myself those boundaries in such a way that, like, I just feel like every part of my life is growing. Like I'm
mm,
focusing on health and focusing on my relationships and my family and of course work. And that kind of balance doesn't always happen. And if
yeah,
anyone out there is a newer entrepreneur, for example, you may very much feel like things are very skewed
yeah,
toward entrepreneurship. And sometimes when you're starting something, like when you have a new baby, you're going to focus on that and it's going to take a
yeah,
lot of your energy. And I feel like I'm in a space where balance is what's lighting my soul on fire. Like I'm really getting to grow
yeah,
in all the areas of my life. And I guess the thing I would say about that is like that comes so if
yeah,
you're in the season of life that's taken a lot of focus in one area, know that it comes and
yeah.
that
I really
it's
love
worth
that
it.
so much,
Yeah.
because it is true. I think like these people, there are seasons of true hustle, right? There are
Yeah.
seasons of like grit and grind. And a lot of people, once they get out of those, they have the luxury of getting out of those. Then all of a sudden they're preaching where they're at now. Like now I'm in
Uh-huh.
this season of balance and like, I'm not going to hustle anymore. So like, don't hustle,
Yeah.
don't, no grit, no grind. Right.
Right.
But it's also like,
Mhm.
yeah, you're saying that because you're
Mhm.
there. But I think it is the beauty
Right.
in that message is like no season lasts forever, and
That's
it's
right.
not meant to. So
Right.
just like as you're working, know that this season of balance,
Right.
more balance will come. Yeah.
All the best things, literally every wonderful thing in your life will require intense focus in the
Yeah.
beginning.
A
kids,
season of discipline.
marriage. That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There are no wonderful things in your life that don't come from that. That's just
So
how it is.
true. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's a beautiful answer. And what is something that you do to protect the peace of your soul?
Mm. So I feel like I'm still saying boundaries, but let me get
No,
more
you're
specific.
good. Yeah.
So I think the thing that I protect my peace best, and I've become really good at this, is that I work very specific hours and then I protect my
Yeah.
family time and my off time. I hear a lot of people, and this was true really even early on. I worked really hard. I am not saying I didn't. There were certainly
Yeah.
seasons of hustle, but like after 5 o'clock or whatever time it was, that was my family's time. Like, especially after traveling back and forth the way I did, like a week away
Yeah.
from a baby when you're still
Mm-mm.
nursing. What was I
Mm-hmm.
doing? And I just, and no shade if you have to
No,
do
but
that.
you
I
were
feel
surviving. Yeah. Yes.
right. Right. But I went into this and I protected that time and protected my family time and those relationships that matter so much. And I think it's just so worth it. And like, if you can sit down and find a way to do that for yourself, it will so improve your life. It's so worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen to that. That's so good.
Yeah.
Where can the
Yeah.
listeners find you?
Yeah, so I hang out on Instagram at Women of Woo. I'm sure you'll put that in the show notes. You can
Yes.
also come hang out at my website and learn more about me there. I do free courses usually every quarter. And then we also have a little mini mine that we do, which is a really easy entry for someone who's newer in business. And again, we do that every quarter. So, just go over and hang out with me on Instagram, though.
Love
It's a
that so
great
much.
place.
And yes, it will be in the show notes.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yep.
so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.